Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another software design review meeting, language completeness and consistency for Wolfram language. This is my third live stream today. Wow, just finished one about history of science and technology. All right, this is a different topic. We are building a little bit of the future here. Okay, first topic, symbols for font variation. Okay.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, right. So there is a suggestion which came from somewhere. I don't know where, actually. Right. So, right, there are various, right. So we have things like underline and bold for the sort of
Yes.
universal, most common font variations. Right now, there are an infinite number of font variations, some of which only make sense for certain characters in certain fonts. So it's not like we're going to have a symbol for every font variation.
Well, I mean,
Suggest
yeah, right. Why aren't we doing? I mean, in addition to this, the fact that we do style of something, comma bold, rather than bold of the thing. I mean, I guess it's because it's a style specification.
yes.
Um, but
So
now,
I mean, bold of the thing actually does work in the context of graphics. In graphics, sorry, excuse me. Sorry, if you so bold can work as a directive in graphics.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't work as a head. It works as a directive. Just because.
just like style.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
but that's not. Yeah, it never works.
Right. Right. Just like you can do blue comma disk to get a blue disk, you can in graphics. You can do bold comma text to get some bolded text in your graphics, but it's never used as a head. And
Does it work if you say graphics of let's just do this. Text text hello 00. Okay, fine. Now I say style.
Yes.
Yes, of course it would.
Yes, okay, that's obvious. Right. Yes, of course it works. Okay, so if I say here, font variation, arrow. Oh boy, these are kind of. Why does it bother with? Oh, I see. Strike through because
Strikethrough is actually necessary because we don't have a symbol for that.
No. I realize. But I mean, so. Okay. So then. So the proposal here is to more mainstream a bunch of these font variations. I think that sounds like a great idea. Which ones are there that are fairly common?
I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
I think those three are the ones that are fairly universal. I mean, I think.
Do we have Jeremy here by any chance?
Jeremy D, I don't think so.
Somebody see if we could find him.
Yeah, I can do that.
Thanks. I think there are other ones, aren't there? I mean, what other? There's.
Well, I mean, you can see the full list in the option inspector. The principal issue is that some of them are not universally implemented on all platforms.
I understand.
In fact, it's possible. Actually, there might be some today that aren't implemented on any platform. It's, operating systems have changed over time, and I don't remember exactly what the compatibility matrix is.
Right. Don't we have a symbol for underline?
Yeah, underline. Why isn't underline?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Right. So we already have underline.
I didn't know that. When did we introduce that?
With a D underlined as a style. Yeah.
Wait a minute. As a style. But I mean, so if I say hello, comma, underlined,
yeah,
I didn't know that. How long have we had that?
20, 30 years.
You cannot be serious.
A very long time.
I will be honest, I didn't know it either, but I know why I don't know it, because I never underline anything.
All right, so V6, so 15 years.
Wow.
It almost certainly added at the same time that bold and plain and italic were added.
It's sort of shocking that I didn't know that. I just want to make another comment that is not related to this, but is related to what I just had to do here. So I would like us, so take a function like this, okay? I want to take all of those things and I want to try all those possibilities on some Boolean expression, okay? How the heck do I get that list? Other than by scraping it from this page, which is absurd.
I mean, there was some, you've mentioned this before, and it's gone to Brian, and I guess Brian is busy with other things. So, right, but we don't.
Well, what I think we should do is, I mean, we've talked about having this general informational thingy-dingy, but I think we should just have something in the data repository, and it should just say.
Yes, that's exactly what you said last time.
Oh, good. Well, at least I'm being consistent.
Yes, like I said, they're right. We scrape these things as part of the build process, and we stick them in the data repository, and we advertise some way to extract it. But right, we need somebody, if we're going to do this, we need somebody who understands the build system to do this, right? I'm not going to sit down and
no, I realize, right? So okay, so can we?
I hesitate to say this, but one could imagine, a stronger notion of reflection, where instead of having to keep separate databases about this, that this would be somehow, this capability would somehow be more deeply integrated into the language.
Yes.
But perhaps in Wolfram language data?
But the question is still how does it get populated, right? And so at least if I understood John's point correctly, so the idea would be to introduce additional programming conventions in order to make these programmatically accessible, because there has to be something in the code that's checking against a list and issuing a message if you don't specify one of these forms, right? And so therefore, there could be some way of publicizing that list.
Yeah, actually, generalize that.
Right, although that list could be in C code and also support all sorts of things which aren't documented for whatever reason.
Right, but I'd like to generalize that, because John has long been pushing for this asset, this way of factoring out assets of things, right?
Yes, which I'm hoping that we'll start discussing for real sometime in the next several months. Yes.
Okay. By the way, is that on the project list, on the global project list, the asset thing?
I think so, but I'm not for sure.
Why don't we check? And also, can we make sure that this point about sort of data resources from capabilities lists is probably what we might call this thing. Capabilities lists might be a nice name. Capability data or something could be a possible access method for it. And it could be that it is stored in the data repository, but like, net model pulls from the neural net repository, capability data might pull from the, some particular type of data resource. But can we make sure that that's in the global project list, please?
Although to the extent that we have, string completions, right? I mean, couldn't we query code assist? I mean, we'd need to know how to access that, but right, presumably there's some way to access the list that code
I know,
assist.
but what I really want is I want a data set of this, and I would even like to embellish this a bit by having some more human readable names for these. I want to make a table based on these, and maybe these capital letters are fine, but I mean, it's just lots of places. I mean, my favorite example of this is SoundNote, where, why is this so slow? You saw how slow that was, John.
It's a bit difficult to tell over Zoom.
Okay, well, I'm gonna do something, and then I'm gonna let you know how slow it is. Okay, so that's it. Okay, that was typing really slowly, and now I'm gonna hit return now. That was really slow. So I'll tell you my observation. When my session is older, this is slower. Is there anything you'd like me to look at? Because this is a big old session. Is there anything you'd like me to look at that would tell you? I mean, okay, there's an untitled 14 there, which gives you some indication. But is there a way to know how much front-end memory is in use?
Yeah, but I have to look it up. I don't remember.
Is it byte count of dollar front end? No.
No.
Memory and use of dollar front end?
Yes.
Really?
Is that documented? I don't think that's documented.
It's been there since
version 3.
It is documented. It is documented.
Wow.
And it looks like it was added in 6.
Off by a factor of 2.
Oh, it is right there in the main usage, no less.
That reminds me of something I've been meaning to tell somebody about, and I'm going to use this excuse to do it, because I hope Avery or somebody else can take these notes. Text has some alternate use cases with offsets and rotation, and I didn't even know it had that, and they should be up in this section. Did you understand?
I got that.
Okay. That presumably goes to Brett.
You could probably compare it to inset because I think it follows pretty closely with what inset does.
Okay. Anyway, I want to come back to SoundNote for a second. Oh my God, this is so slow. I'm typing. This is not echoing my typing. Okay, I hit it now, and it only just came up. So is there anything else you'd like me to do, John, to debug this? I mean, my front end is at 3.5 gigabytes now, which is obviously big.
Yeah. Well, my guess is that we have some internal hash tables that are getting too large for their britches and need to be cleaned out.
Okay.
So I don't have
anything else I can
for you to try, but I'll start investigating. But I don't want to try to divert anything now. I don't have anything quick and easy for you to look at.
Okay, fine.
Well, actually, I do have one thing quick and easy, but it'll take me a second to look it up. So
okay, but like this is so frigging annoying. So here, for example, I want these names, and I want a human name. You know, rock space organ, for example, or some other human name for these things. See what I'm saying? So I can make a table of this is the waveform for this and that and the other.
Right. Well, sense? Yeah, but that I will point out that is neither a programmatic nor a data scraping project, right? That's a human curation project.
No, I know it's got some human curation. We have to do some actual work, but the 0th order piece of this is to make a data set that just has one column that's just these things. Anyway, and by the way, if I look at font variations, oh God, this is driving me crazy, the speed.
You can just down arrow and hit enter to accept that completion.
Yeah, I understand that, but that's not the issue. If I accept,
I understand, but you can avoid the immediate annoyance by only typing in 5 characters and then down arrow instead of all 15.
Oh, okay. I'm just practicing my typing. Okay. So these are the only ones? There are no others ever allowed?
There are more, but they're not documented because they, like I said, they may only apply to certain characters of certain fonts of certain platforms.
What's an example?
We need Ian for that.
Like ligatures, for example.
Yeah, certain ligatures.
Or the numerals where the baseline is different type things. Where 9 has a descender.
Did we manage to find Jeremy by any chance? Jeremy D. No.
Not yet.
Okay. What does Underlights do?
Oh, Underlight is what gives spell checking. It's
why did it happen?
You can give it a color. It's not Boolean.
Right, and you would presume, okay.
And we're going to be improving it to add some styles, some different kinds of underlighting and other forms of control in 13.1.
So wait a minute. So let's see, what does shadow?
That is one that I'm not sure will even work.
That's
Did
weird.
something. Can you blow that up? Because I can't see what it actually did. All right.
It's weird. Okay, so then we have.
So we're actually working on a more robust controllable and platform independent version of that for 13.1. We're asked to do it to help, for example, being able to plop labels onto maps and that sort of thing.
They are shadowed with a transparent, so I don't know what it is, something which makes them stand out over the background by
right. Usually a contrast in colors, so that like your mouse cursor is.
And
I see.
And so U2 is working on a pixel shader method, which we can use to create some very general sorts of effects with a lot of levers of control.
Okay, that's cool. All right, so the question is, should these be like underlined? Which, by the way, the fact that this says underline and the function is called underline is still freaking weird. Okay, and what does, if I do
Well,
outline,
right, it's a different sense. One is a Boolean flag, the other is a style name. It's not.
Oh, look at that.
Right, I don't think that's actually inconsistent.
Fair enough.
And so neither shadow nor outline work under Windows.
Okay.
Which is because we're just using what the operating system gives to us, and Macintosh gives us the stuff Windows doesn't.
Okay.
But like some of the ligatures only work on Windows and not Mac or Linux.
Or maybe even only on some fonts.
Right.
We're adding for 13.1, we're adding the ability to control various open type features, which controls things like ligatures, things like the reason Ian added it was because he was annoyed by the kind of zero. He didn't like the zero with the dot, he wanted zero with the slash, and that's an open type feature.
What do you mean feature? You mean you can tweak the font somehow?
Right. Individual fonts will have choices in them that, whether or not to do a given ligature, or whether or not numbers are old style or conventional, that sort of thing. Whether or not zeros have dots, slashes, or nothing. So not every font has every feature. But it's a thing that fonts offer, which it's a bit power user to be able to get to those things, but it's very nice to be able to do so if that's what you want.
Okay, all right. So let's look at these. I think this underlight thing is a useful thing, and I wonder whether that can be. So what we've got. So we've got underline, which I didn't know existed.
Yep.
And we could imagine a general, font.
Well, by the point we're at a general font something, I'm like, why are we not just using font variations
As an option?
Yes.
You mean what we have right now?
Yes. Right. The advantage of having these named styles is that you can just say style of foo, comma, underlined.
Yeah.
As opposed to foo, comma, font variations goes to underline, goes to true.
I think the other Jeremy just joined.
Yeah. Hello.
Hi, we're talking about supporting font variations more directly in the language.
Okay.
Okay, so I mean, like, for example, underlighted. Let's say we had underlighted of red, but maybe we could also have underlighted of some, maybe we could just have underlighted like that. Be some automatic underlighting.
Yeah.
Right. It could default to the red that we use for spell check, say.
Or something different. Right. But okay, so that's that one. Strikethrough. Right, it feels so much like an action, it'd be like strike through of the thing. It's just like, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the analogy with underlined would be stricken through.
Struck through.
Or struck through.
Which is horrible. Stricken, we'll be using whence pretty soon. We should have that, as a way to get some kind of trace back.
I still use shown rather than shined, so tells you where I learned my English.
Huh. I don't actually. No, I can't decode that actually, but okay.
Well, just in terms of this, tense, verb tense thing, something else to consider is that we have the option frame and the head framed.
I know. Yes. So this is more like, bold could be bolded, but it isn't.
Right.
Yeah. And
maybe. Go ahead.
Right. I was going to say, in some sense, underlined is the
wrong one.
Although it's consistent with, like dashed, right? Although we have both dashed and dashing of, right? Or, dashed and dashing. So.
Okay, so that's another one, the ing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because we could have. We could have underlighting, which is maybe what you had elsewhere, to be the form that eats something. Get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
The consistent thing would probably be bold, underline, underlighting. Now, unfortunately, lighting is an option.
Yeah.
We also have highlighted.
Yeah, although that's kind of a weird thing, right?
I don't know how weird it is.
That's weird. I know, right? It's like I took, I opened up my desk drawer, took out the highlighter, and drew on my monitor. That's just. I guess it's not that weird, but.
It's much better doing it virtually than physically.
Is it obvious that we don't want something called underlighted as well as highlighted?
Well, can you underlight a general expression?
Don't see why not. John?
Well, so what will happen if you underlight a graphic?
You get a little wiggly line underneath it.
Yeah.
What happens if you do like a fraction? Does the numerator and denominator get squiggles independently?
For now, yes, that would be the case.
I think that's just fine. Honestly, this seems like a thing that would be quite useful. I don't use this as much as I would like to. I used it more, I think, when it first came out. I should remember it. I use I think underlighted as a function would be useful. Now, things like strikethrough. See, these things are very weird to me as font variations. I mean, I understand that technically they're font variations, but they just feel like, strikethrough just doesn't seem like a thing that would be a font variation.
Except it's right. If what is it? The Command T, is that what opens the font dialog, right? Those are all options that appear in standard font dialogues, right? I mean, people understand these as font variations, irrespective of the technical details.
Do they?
I think so.
Some people, at least.
Right. So they're okay. So on my Linux desktop, they're called effects. Strikeout, underline.
But people have only thought about applying them to fonty type things. I mean,
exactly, and that's, well, I mean, I think that's generally true, right? Bold doesn't make your lines any thicker. It'll affect the texty things inside of whatever expression, as would, italic.
But underlighted doesn't. Underlighted is potentially a more global effect.
Well, that's underlighted the head. That's not underlighted the style, I don't think.
No, that's probably correct. Okay, but now let's look at these other ones. Strikethrough. What's the use case for strikethrough? See, what I can imagine is somebody wanting to say, map. I mean, I do this all the time. Map framed onto range of 10 or something. All the time I do that. Could do that same thing with highlighted.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the question is with strikethrough, is it the same story? Or is strikethrough something that is really a thing?
No, it's a named style.
Well,
I mean, you're talking.
I know that that's the case right now, but I'm saying, if we had the capability, like for example here, it's rather useful that I could just say highlighted here. Okay, whereas
I would question that that's useful, but fine.
Well, I mean, it would be like, well, I mean, a trivial example would be, visualizing, what do they call it? The net of primes, your table of integers, right. And yeah, it's
right.
So, and any place where you have a list of things and you're wanting to call out specific elements, or in the case of strikethrough, it might be things that have, things that are not relevant, for example.
See, if prime Q highlighted, this is lovely. I mean, else identity.
You need a pound and an ampersand
I'm
there.
really tired today. What did I do?
You also need a pound.
My God, I'm really losing it. That's if my gosh, what am I doing here? I was thinking
highlighted of pound and then just pound rather than identity.
Yes.
And yeah, I don't know why you deleted the ampersand.
Okay, lovely.
Right, and I suppose you could make the second pound, style of pound font variation goes to strikethrough.
Yes, I'm kind of wondering whether it is of interest to give a sub-value to style. Does this make any sense? To be equivalent to style of X, red.
It could. Does it need to round trip, or is this something that evaluates? I really don't want to round trip this.
No, don't round trip it. It's stupid to round trip it. It's unnecessary to round trip it.
And if you did style red, 32, it would still, continue out,
Well, of course, the problem is what happens to the style of 32, red. I think that's the end of my idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was gonna say I'm just as likely to do style of red 32.
Which of course would, do its own thing. It would give you the 32 point
Yeah, it would
text
give
of red.
you, right, it would give you a little red box at font size 32. And now you can click on it and get a color selector for your
But it didn't change the font size in that.
Right. Okay. All right. So anyway, so what are the issues here? So what we're saying is underlighted is a possible thing to generalize highlighted. That's what I support for that.
Okay. And I mean, I guess the question is, do we feel like Strikethrough or small caps, all caps are sufficiently useful to promote to named styles, or do they just stick as font variations?
When you say named styles, you mean as symbols?
Yes.
Okay, let's go through each one in turn. Okay. Okay, so Strikethrough. What are the use cases?
Usually the big one is to indicate things which are in a list that should be considered, being omitted for some reason.
Obsolete, removed, etc.
The other thing about Strikethrough is that I can imagine, Strikethrough in its most simple-minded form is just the same color, just the font with its same color struck through. But I can imagine, like Underlighted, that, you might want to say it's black, but I want to strike through in gray, for example.
Is that possible? I mean, obviously you could do an overlay of two things.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it would have to be, is we would have to synthesize our own Strikethrough effect.
Which just seems fine to me. I mean, unless fonts do anything special with Strikethrough?
Fonts, no. The font system, I mean, we're basically using the font rendering system in the operating system, and it's going to decide how to render the Strikethrough. But no, Strikethrough isn't something that I'm aware of that is a feature of the font itself, though.
Don,
Okay.
do you know how it positions the strike?
I was in fact stopping myself from blurbing on and on. That's the one thing I could imagine that might be in the font file is a position of the strike, but I'm not sure if it is or if it just gloms onto something else like an axis line or something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure it's a major use case for us, but Strikethrough is a common font variation that's used in chat clients. I don't know if it really ties into our chat system as much, but
what does it mean there?
I mean, it's a common system, if you're using Slack or other things, it typically is one of the prominent font variations next to bold and italics.
What do people typically have it mean there?
I think it's probably context dependent, but often it's, again, sort of providing information that it's either.
What does it mean? What does it mean?
I would guess that at least some people are using it in the same way that the plain text people use *H.
Right.
Is what?
Right. As a joke, right? You use. Right, you use some archaic term that you for archaic in whatever sense of archaic, and then you have that Strikethrough and you replace it with the modern term.
Or isn't it fun what politician stupid strikeout actual name of politician did?
Right. Okay, so it's ironic in some sense. I mean,
right.
Its real use tends to be in documents where you're showing what's been deleted.
Exactly. I was going to say
it's also used for step by step a lot.
Say that again.
Really?
Michael?
Yeah. For step by step, like you counted this term with this term.
Oh, interesting.
Wait a minute. Why do you put Strikethrough through that?
Because you want to get rid of them in the next line.
So you're doing a strike through on a piece of math.
A divided by A, you strike through both is 1.
How do you draw that strike through? As a standard textual strike through?
Yeah.
Using this font variations mechanism.
Yeah.
And it works on, so I mean, if I say,
I'm not saying we do it in alpha, but people do it. You see it a
oh, I
lot
see,
in
I see.
Stack Exchange and related things.
Okay. That is not beautiful. What would you do? Well, Michael, what would you do here if you had a, you know, if you could do whatever?
The diagonal one would be looking much nicer.
Right, but that's not a font variation. And by the way, aren't these font things gray, or am I misreading that?
I suspect that, yeah, it looks like they are.
And notice, to Jeremy's point, that it has somehow avoided the, you know,
I think that's
sign.
a weird thing with the plus sign. I think it's the midpoint of the X height is my guess,
Oh,
but
really?
I don't know how that works with that plus sign.
Right, and you know, you may get a different result. Like if you change x plus 1 with the string containing x plus 1, you may get a different result.
Yeah, well,
right?
let's just say help me out here, somebody.
110, I think.
I wanted to get some of the funky ones. Wow. Weirdness abounds. What the heck? Is that to do with our rendering of these things?
I mean, it certainly is the case that those characters are being rendered in a different font by us. So yeah, it's probably because the fonts, whatever line is drawing the strike through on is just different between the two fonts.
I see what you're saying.
Relative to the baseline.
Okay. Okay. So, you know, what Michael is reporting is that a generalized strike through, which would to me be like kind of the analog of filling in graphics or, you know, whatever else, is you know, I still have not used anything I've written. I still have not used any of our nice new graphics filling stuff. I have to find a place to use that.
A similar version would be to having a Feynman slash. So a little bit more diagonal than normal and a little bit longer.
I thought it was a Dirac slash. Much as
It's back to Richard.
No, it's Dirac, I'm sure.
Okay.
From the Dirac equation.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yes, a slashed character, right? I mean, so okay. To me, strike through as a font variation, it's fine, but I think it's somewhat limited, and I think it would be interesting to have a strike through that was capable of dealing with a situation like this in a not totally stupid way. Sandra on our live stream is commenting that strike through can be abused to get H bar. Yes, that's another.
Right. Or you could just use the character H bar.
Indeed. But you can't use, I mean, P slash and so on for momentum with a.
Yes, with your gamma mu del news.
Right, a nice gamma matrix. Dressed in a gamma matrix, I suppose.
Yes.
Adorned with. Okay, in any case. All right, so look, seems to me, let's go back and think through a possibility for a strike through function. That is, I mean, I wish it was past tense, like underlighted could be. But I think that's where we should go with that. let's talk about the small caps thing, okay? Because that's the other one you have listed here. And I think what was the other one that we had down here?
Small caps and all caps.
Okay, and there's also the shadow business, which I think is sort of
Well, and we're gonna say more about shadow in probably the next month or so. We're gonna come back around to this shadow business.
Okay, fine.
With
okay.
a fairly different approach.
Okay, all right. So then let's talk about the caps business. I wish I had a good place to put these. Maybe I should just have one. Maybe I should have an ILD. Look, I do, and I have it. Do I have an LCC? No, I don't. How many years have we been doing LCC meetings?
5 or 6.
Well, now we have a folder for them, which perhaps we can remember. Okay, all right. All caps, small caps. Okay, let me understand something here. So if I say, oops, here's one that I needed to do right recently, very recently, like yesterday, actually. Let's see, but this actually worked for me. I mean, I didn't know how to do this.
The extra bracket.
I know. What do you know?
Right, and presumably if the first A had been a lowercase a, they'd all be the same size.
Yeah, now this we synthesize. This does not come from the operating system. We're doing this.
So does that mean the kerning is wrong?
No. I mean, basically what we're doing is we're just creating a smaller version of the font for the small caps.
All right, what is this like? As in, I mean, this to me is useful. Now, what does all caps do? I mean, why aren't you just saying 2 uppercase if you want all caps?
Well, so it's a question of whether or not you want to change the underlying data or not.
Right. So, for example, the various tables on the website, right? They, in certain tables it appears as all caps. In other cases, it preserves the capitalization. So you store it once with the canonical capitalization, and then you set in the CSS.
Yeah, I realize that the CSS can do this, but
and you could say who cares, and I'm not saying I care. We could leave that as a font variation. That's fine.
Right. The people who need this have the capability to do this.
Well, like the small caps thing, though. Something. I mean, look, if you want to make it uppercase, you can say 2 uppercase. In most of the things in our language, most of the things I can imagine. I mean, basically, people using our language, the evaluator is typically around. Am I making sense? You can assume the evaluator exists.
Yeah.
Whereas small caps, there's no way to do that with the evaluator.
So the one place where you could run into trouble with that is, and I'm not really arguing for this, but I just so you fully understand the consequences. Where you have structure, you have a bunch of strings embedded in structure. Oh, and by the way, some of those strings aren't being displayed. Some of those strings are inputs to functions, and they can't change. So
yeah, this is wrong. This is wrong. Why isn't that capital Psi big?
Because we don't have a general enough version of capitalization, but that will change though. We're doing a bunch of string improvements, and this is going to come with that. So.
Right,
okay.
And so I guess small caps only applies to ASCII, or because
for now, I'm not sure if it's only ASCII, but it certainly has limits. But that will change though.
So I think that small caps is like red and gray and things like that, and could be. And like bold, I mean, I could imagine maybe even a symbol called small caps. Is that obviously stupid?
Not to me.
I think it's, I mean, if we're going to have a symbol, I think this is the symbol to have, just like we have, you know, plain, bold, italic, small caps is just, it's just another one.
I think we should have it. I think it's useful.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, so we've got that. We've got underlighted, Strikethrough we're still studying. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Any other comments on this area?
With regard to the caps, I'll point out that some of the presentation notebook styles use maybe small caps, certainly all caps.
Oh my gosh, I hate the ones that do all caps. I always fix it.
I agree with you. Stylistically.
I'm sorry, Jeremy, that you may feel that's a wonderful choice, and we'll agree to disagree.
Well, Jeremy, did you put that in there, or did it?
No, we did a variation of styles, and some of these to have you want visual variation between all the styles there, but it's locked in. I understand that if you don't like it, it's annoying to unlock it. It's actually hard to dig in and fix it.
As I recall.
I don't think, is it that easy? It's in the style sheet. You have to dig.
No. There's a drop down for it, I think.
Okay.
Well, I mean, for any given cell, it's easy to do. You just change it on that cell. But yeah, you don't have to make a style sheet change.
Question for John: is there anything else you want me to do in debugging why this front end is so slow?
I might have something for you later, but right now you have my full attention in this meeting. So
okay, fine.
My multitasking abilities are somewhat limited.
Hey, Stephen, I have a quick small cap question. Could I share my screen really quick?
Yep.
So I think what we're doing is, John, you're probably just shrinking the smaller font size.
That is exactly correct.
But
yes,
if you look at what happens in Photoshop, you've got equal weight for all the strokes, for all the characters, and you can't get that if you just shrink font size. So I don't know if there's some way you can bump up the weight and try to adjust. I don't know how this is done, but proper small caps is uniform. And when you do it like this, you don't really get the same look.
So until recently, the answer would have been just a definite no under Windows, and I think on Macintosh it's more possible, but I'm not sure if we have. I don't think we have a smooth slider control on the weights. But we do have. But like under Windows, it was until 12.3, I think it was like, you might remember, we were trying to get semi-bold in there and weren't able to do it until 12.2 or 12.3.
This is more subtle than semi-bold. This is not a proper weight. This is like a faux bolding, I think, happening here.
Yeah. I don't know how to do this, to be honest.
Yeah. It's probably not a killer, but just something to be aware of if we really want to do it properly. I don't know what's involved.
It's Ian's project again.
I'm sorry?
I said it's Ian's project.
Not quite. Ian isn't really looking into something quite like this.
No, I think it is. I mean, because small caps are, some of those things that, like ligatures and whatnot.
All right, let's move on. I think that point is making small caps look a bit less attractive, but I still think it's a useful thing to have.
Mm-hmm.
All right, can we go on to this, please?
Yeah.
Kernel decides that typeset term whether to include a context.
So sorry, I haven't written up a proper reference page for this yet, although I don't think it'll be hard. But my notion was that we would just have an alighted context function, option, excuse me, a front end option that could be applied on a given cell or whatever. And it could have a list of explicit contexts, or you could just pass it all. And in those cases, the underlying cell expression would still have the full context. It would evaluate properly, it would save properly, it would copy properly, but it would just display as something different.
Well, that will be good.
It would display as something different, and it would just have, you know, like one cursor movement over the thing, you know, the alighted portion. So it's in a way you can, it's kind of like the coding ligatures, you know, the that we've call them operator appearances, but the coding ligatures in a way is kind of like that, except it's not something that cursoring through would break it apart. Yeah.
So what did you have in mind for the actual look?
I don't know.
I think it should be some boxed object.
So I mean, there are two general directions we can go in. One is a uniform appearance regardless of context, and the second is some variation based on, you know, if you have 2 or 3 or 4 different contexts inside a given expression.
Yeah, we could do something like we do for cryptography, where we have a color coded, you know, where we have, you know, when if you do
Right. So you know, you won't have any idea what the context is, but you'll be able to tell if these two, assuming there aren't too many contexts, you'll be able to tell if these two symbols are in the same context or a different context.
Or you can provide some, you know, maybe there's some way you can, you know, embed a bit of information. Like, for example, how many context markers are there, and would that somehow have a predictable effect on the appearance?
Or just first letter, last letter. I mean, look, the main thing is we want a single character size object.
Yeah.
And I would love to integrate the backtick into that object. You know, just a you know, something more integrated like that, you know, like the thing I've now got with the highlight there.
Okay, so you would not want to have a separate backtick character.
I don't want it. I think it's just very noisy. I mean, Jeremy, do you have a comment on that? Do we still have Jeremy Davis?
Yeah, I'm here. I don't really have a strong opinion though.
I was
think
gonna
it's
say,
going to look much better without the explicit backticks.
I was gonna say my two preferences would be just the backtick and nothing.
No, we can't do that because that means something different.
No, it
I
doesn't.
think, yes, it does. A pure backtick is a local, is a subcontext.
Well, I mean, it's going to look like that, sure, but you know, in context of like information or something.
I'm wondering if we want just sort of some sort of stylized context symbol, like maybe it's grayer or.
Yeah, that's what I think.
I
think the whole thing should be, look, I like the idea of some kind of visual clue about whether the things are in different contexts. I think that's a clever idea. And I think a muted color would be a decent way to do it.
By the way, another option, which we haven't discussed, is that we could apply some sort of styling to the entire symbol.
Yes.
That might give a clue as to the nature of the hidden context.
Well, I'm not sure we want the nature. I mean, I'm thinking that if a symbol is grayed, for example, that would be a reasonable way to indicate that it's a foreign symbol of some kind. But I think we need something in front of it. I think we need a little mark in front of it. And then maybe the symbol gets slightly grayed down, or maybe we don't. I think we need to try this. We need a design for the mark. And I would recommend that the mark has some blob of color. Dan on our live stream is suggesting perhaps in context aliasing that one could have some capability to specify what the elided version of that context could be. And a mechanism like context aliasing. That makes sense?
Context aliasing is a concept that lives firmly in the kernel.
I see. Well, okay, but I mean,
Whereas here, we're really talking about something that lives firmly in the front end.
well, I know that, but I mean, the context aliasing is basically a mapping between contexts and between aliases and contexts. And here,
Yeah.
elided context could be a mapping between contexts and their elided forms.
Yeah.
So John, would you ever see the elided contexts, like the elision part of it, in an input cell, or would it always be expanded out in that case?
My thinking, although I'm happy to discuss this, but my thinking is that if you were to copy this, say, out of an information cell and paste it into an input cell, that it would just all expand out.
Sadly, I think that's what it has. Blah, 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 blah. And certainly in an input form cell, it has to do that. But I think it'd be great if it didn't expand out. I mean, maybe, look, clearly when you mouse over it, it should show you what the full context is. Perhaps when you click it, it expands itself out.
Maybe.
I just don't think you want the expanded form most of the time.
Well, okay, so my opinion is when you're looking at it in information, most of the time, you don't need the context. There are a few cases, but mostly you don't. But if you copy it into an input cell,
You're probably more correct. Yeah, you're more correct. It needs to be there probably, because you're not going to copy a giant. Well,
right, because because say I'm debugging my function and I want to figure out why this down value isn't firing, right? So I copy out the down value, I paste it into an input cell, and then I give it the input, and right, and I need all those other things to be in the right context. And the fact that it blew up a little bit isn't so bad because I just have the one down value.
Dan is suggesting that without the horrifying general utilities, which by the way is something I so much want to get rid of. What did this just do?
It created a notebook. Yeah, it's a thing.
It's a tally thing.
Yeah. Right. And then you can click on that and it'll open another notebook with more definitions.
It's rather nice. Another good idea from Tally. Why haven't we done anything with this?
Well, it's.
I mean, the underline here is the indicator that it's a special type of thing, right? Is that correct?
Not sure.
Well, I suspect so. Well, that's a good. Thank you for that comment.
So, I mean, the real potential problem here is window vomit, by which
we don't want windows. We don't want it to bring up a separate window. I'm not suggesting the separate window thing. I'm suggesting.
But that sort of thing could maybe be encapsulated into attached cells or something.
But it could also be an information. I mean, that could be the output in question mark, whatever.
Yeah,
the basic point here,
it doesn't scale. It's cute and all for reasonably small functions, but it doesn't scale.
I think we've agreed here. Special character here. I like the idea of a color blob that's a hash of the context. I think this elided contexts. The reason I don't like that name as such is that it suggests something more functionality oriented than appearance. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand why. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I'm not sure I understand why you're saying that.
Because I think elided contexts might mean, you're going to, and people don't understand what we will understand about when's the parser running versus when's the evaluator running and so on. I can imagine people just thinking, that means it just ignores those contexts. I mean, I'm thinking, it's more like context display or context
Well, then it would be a Boolean, right? I mean, you're only worried
know.
about the all case, which I mean is probably the most common case.
Well, what about context elisions?
Or masked contexts?
Oh, I like that one.
I'm not sure I like masked ones. Maybe it's because I see anyway, the masked is a bad thing in a pandemic, you know. Or good, depending on how you look at it, but whatever.
Triply vexed contexts.
Yeah, right. Context. I just don't like this. This really seems like functionality, not display.
I mean, I think context elisions is fine. It sounds fine to me. And you know, it preserves some capability that, in addition to, I mean, in that form, it sounds like we don't know that we want to go to all the trouble, but if we ever did and wanted to extend the syntax, so you say this context goes to, you know, this
sure.
kind of elision, you know, that names, you
which
know,
sorry, which name says that?
Context elisions, I think.
Yeah.
Says that. So
it does. I think we should go ahead and implement this. Maybe we can implement it as context elisions. I reserve the right to suggest a different name.
Okay.
Is there any time you don't reserve the right to suggest a different name?
Well, I mean, I'm just I'm just warning people that if you burn this in deeply into the code, there's, you know,
No, it's easy for easier than I'd like to admit to you for me to change these names.
Okay, and I like the idea of a color blob, and I think design should try and come up with something for this with maybe a little dot of color inside it, like a little circle of color inside it. Does that make any sense? And I don't know.
No. So it's going to be a hash. So is it going to be like a small array with color?
No. It would just be a single color. So what we would do is it would basically
the choice of color is itself the hash.
Okay, all right.
So basically, you know, it'd be it'd be something like this. And the question is, if you have, you know, in a typical expression, you're going to have, I don't know, 2 or 3 contexts maybe. And what this display kind of encourages me in is the chance they're going to be identical, the colors are going to be indistinguishable, is low. See what I'm saying? Now, if we make these a little bit,
and I think there's a little bit of work out there with the notion of color hashing to try to, you know, ensure that different values produce different visually distinctive colors. I can look up that. I think people have done some work on that before.
Okay, you can also mix shape into it.
Yes, that's true too.
You know, circles and diamonds and small stars.
I mean, by the way, this is not the first time the notion of a color hash has come up in, you know, that I've been involved in a discussion about color hashing. So, yeah.
Be nice to have a function in the function repository for that.
I think
there is.
Yeah, I think we discussed something like this about a year ago internally for, I don't remember the context, but yeah.
But it wasn't about context. That's all we know.
No.
Let's see, is there a color hash function? Oh. There's something called hash u.
Yeah, sure, there you go.
I don't know whether it does anything profound, but
I mean, it probably creates the hash, you know, divides it by the maximum number for that and feeds it to Hugh.
You know, I literally just yesterday did a thing where I should have used this. I just literally hashed values and looked at the numbers.
In any case, I mean, you know, the main thing I'd want to avoid is an algorithm which is likely to, you know, produce a nearly black version of blue and a nearly black version of red, and think that they're distinctive.
Yeah, right. I understand, but so I think that random color, together with, as a first cut, random color with a lightning like this and a dot of that would be pretty reasonable, because I think you're going to see many copies of, what you're going to see is an expression with many of the blues and many of the cyans or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think it's very unlikely that you get, it's possible that you have many of this, but okay, you could have those two cyans. I don't know. We should try it, but I think something like this is going to be good. And the concept of a shape-based one is reasonable as well. That's up to Jeremy and the design team whether we can fit that kind of information in there.
Okay.
All right. This is formal operators. Oh my God, what a mess. I find myself using this WFR function, unformalized symbols, all the time. Because when I want to display things, I typically want the unformalized version. But
yeah, well, we're gonna have to update it because there's a lot of formal stuff in the pipeline.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's take a look.
Right. So, I don't know if you read through my little summary there, but
I just read it. Yeah,
right. So just to give, right. So, right. I spent between 10 and maybe 60 seconds thinking of the names for all of these. So the names haven't been carefully curated, but right. I went through and pick these things, and then there are those questions we'll need to answer.
Okay, so the basic idea here is if we look at, for example, okay, so right now we have the situation with axiomatic theory, okay, that if we say even Boolean axioms, okay, what we're using is circle plus circle times to represent what are really and or, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of, but somebody has a weird piece of interference on the phone. I don't know what that is. Sounds like an old-fashioned modem.
Interesting.
Maybe you're not hearing it. Maybe
I'm not hearing it.
I am hearing it. Yes, it could be like
it's very quiet, but it's there.
Yes, it could be like a line printer or something.
Yes. Okay. In any case, so the concept for this is what? Is the concept that, for example, if I do the ones for ring theory, that instead of using, we've got a bunch of weird funkiness here. We've got that weird little thing that's got a kind of like a cyclops with a hat on it type thing. Right? That should be a dotted zero, probably. Just making sense? That's the zero, that's the identity for addition.
Okay.
Comments on this? Maybe this one isn't too bad because it's these circle operators are okay, but this is suggesting additional forms of plussing and timesing and so on.
Right, because the complaint was you didn't have enough pluses and times for, all the axiom systems. So
yes.
So the conclusion was, all right, well, let's add a bunch of pluses and times. And if we also need some ands and ors, I'm sure I could find some ands and ors to add to this list, like a dotted and or a dotted or some such. So you could have,
Yeah, these are all amusing. And they're definitely not bad. Does Michael have a comment or anybody else on where this is going?
I think they look useful.
Okay.
So my comment here is that I think we had two different discussions at the same time. There was the discussion of the formal operators, and there was the discussion of the need of more operators. And I think both things are interesting. So it's good to have all these operators so that we can have more and more complicated theories. And then there was the thing that what happens if the user is already using some of these symbols. We are going to spoil that. And that's where formal versions of these usable operators could also be there.
Right, but I think this is instead of more formal things.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that by the time we've got plus dot with another dot, and it's, yeah, everybody's going to go dotty.
Right, and if we're worried about user symbols, we could make these new symbols protected and switch to using those, and then, you know, except for malicious users who unprotect the symbols, we, you know, will be fine.
No. I think the point here is that in the same way that we have A, which is usable by the user, and then formal A, which is protected, we have circle plus, which is usable by the user. And then if anything, we could have a formal circle plus. What we should never have is a formal plus. That's my point.
Sorry, say that again. A formal circle plus we could have, but not a formal plus. Why?
Exactly, because I think what we need formal is to use symbols that could be used already by the user. We don't need.
I see. Because plus, your claim is that plus, that formalization is a way to say this isn't going to be, you know, you can't set a value for this.
Exactly.
But plus, you wouldn't want to set a value for anyway.
Exactly.
As opposed to, this is a variation on plus to indicate that it means something slightly different.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, right, but do we need a formal plus if we have, you know, plus hat and plus dot and all of those guys?
No, that's the point Jose is making.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. We don't need them. It's a different question.
Well, I think it can't hurt to have these extra symbols. I would not protect them. I think by the time somebody is going to that much trouble to blow themselves up, they should blow themselves up. I wanted to say for axiomatic theory, two things that we really need. One is a common name for these axiom systems, for making tables of them. The other is, which occurs to me, is that we could always have some kind of association that is just like we can say for this, something like operators. Right, that there. That's essentially a mapping that gives you the meaning, although it's not really quite the right way around, and we could perhaps have another one that is the right way around, that is the substitution you make to turn this into a thing which is actually semantically understandable immediately. Does that make sense? And what I could imagine is something where you can have something which deformalizes in a table like this, where you have an association that has something like, you know, etc. Is that crazy? See the point? I mean, it's just a way to, if you want to make the informal version.
I was actually thinking about whether you should be able to do that using the font variation sort of thing that we were talking about first, where it's still formal A, but you set this style and it renders without the dot.
That's very interesting. That's a very interesting idea. I mean, in traditional form, it could render without the dot, which it doesn't right now, right?
It always renders with the dot.
That's a very interesting idea that we could hide the dot CSS style in font variation. Is that plausible, implementable, guys?
It is implementable.
Right. I mean, we're basically just adding the dot on our own. So we just need a style that says don't bother drawing the dot.
Casual.
Yeah.
Remove formal where. Don't.
Or you could use informal if casual's too casual.
I think that's a really good idea, because that would save, I mean, a lot of issues that I've run into using this stuff. It's nice to have these axioms with the formal symbols. I mean, it might be super confusing. Maybe traditional form would switch off the dots, which I think would be good. Let's investigate having traditional form switch off the dots. Anybody want to comment on that? Jose, Michael, anybody else?
I mean, so once we have the option, right, it's just adding the option to the traditional form style definitions. And I mean, that seems reasonable to me.
Okay, but I want to know from Michael and Jose whether they think it's super confusing.
I think there will be some people like Paul Ebert to do everything in traditional form who will not like it. Who will, for instance, also do all their input in traditional form. Like, is the dot in the input traditional form visible or not?
Yeah,
Well,
I see some people complain if there is no clear distinction between formal A and A.
Well, but traditional form elides many things. You know, there are many things that are like a, you know, I don't know, a Bessel function. It's just a J in traditional form.
Although I suppose the point is that you could, you know, at least there's the tooltip that tells you it's.
Well, we could have tooltips here. Look, the fact is, in using this stuff, a big pain point has been having to say unformalized symbols all the time.
But it would be only in traditional form output, not in traditional form input.
I guess that's right.
Okay.
Is that doable? I suppose that should be doable.
It's not as happy as I would like it. It might involve throwing a dynamic on the right-hand side of that option.
Well, okay. Let us investigate that possibility. In terms of these additional things, we're going to need to spend a few more minutes actually understanding, you know, based on the Unicode description and things, whether, you know, whether these names are right. They don't look far off. Is underbar what we call an underbar?
I think so.
It's an underbar with a capital B.
Right.
And overdot is a capital D as well.
Are you sure about that? I thought I actually checked overdot.
Yeah, underbar definitely is.
Okay, so, all right. So the symbol name is.
Yeah, overdot is capital D. Yeah.
All right. Okay, I was just confused.
Okay. So I assume when we have under, do we have under tilde?
As a symbol, do you mean?
Yeah, we do not. But we do have over tilde. What is this weird, you know, 1980s, 1970s computer noise? Weird. Okay. Well, okay. So the question here, we have to be a little bit careful reading through these things to make sure that there is no possibility that we want to take over these things. I mean, like plus tilde is sort of okay. And why did you choose these particular ones?
These are existing Unicode symbols that we have not given long names to. That, right?
But these are the only Unicode symbols available in this general semantic space. Is that right? Or
are these the only? I'm not sure these are the only ones, but these are the ones that seem to be in the general spirit of having more, you know, more operators for, you know, ring theory with, you know, 3 different times is in the.
Fine.
And all these symbols have been in Unicode for a long time.
Right.
Sure.
I think these all date to version 2. Certainly the overwhelming majority date to V2.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. Well, I don't have any obvious objection to these.
All right, and then the plus and time ones are flat, and then the not sure about the down semi-direct product.
Whoa. Who's saying they're flat? No, don't make them flat. That's going to kill a bunch of operator stuff for axiomatic theory.
Okay, well then are they left associative or right associative?
Thinking. Oh gosh. Let me ponder that question. Does anybody else have an opinion about this?
I think it will depend on every single one.
Well, do you think you could pick it for under tilde plus? I mean, that was a surprise. When I was doing this stuff for version 3, I looked through a lot of books and I found that the precedence was surprising. Oh yeah, what about the precedence of these things? What about the precedence?
Well, yeah, that's another thing that needs to be figured out.
You're saying there are plus-like and there are times-like.
Right. Well, by plus-like and times-like, I meant more visual appearance.
Yeah, but they could also be.
But yes, in terms of precedence, they could be in the general vicinity of plus and times.
Yeah, but I mean, circle times hat versus square dot. What's the relative precedence?
Right. Well, I guess I don't have a strong opinion on that.
As I say, I was very surprised when I looked at this in the 1990s at how consistent books were. And there appeared to be a slight correlation because they used a little bit more space usually around lower precedence operators. I mean, we spent a lot of effort in version 3 getting the precedence of the circle timeses of this world right. And they have been surprisingly decent. Well, with the exception of, I'll show you one that I don't like at all.
Partial D.
What's that?
Partial D.
Yeah, partial D is wrong.
What's wrong with it? It's too high?
Yeah. You need a subscript on it, right?
That looks okay. You don't
put a 5 in front of the X.
Oh, for God's freaking sake.
This is what I've been saying for many, many years. That is totally not obvious.
I'm totally wrong. Wow. How come I've never run into this before? It's presumably unfixable at this point. Is that true? I mean, where is it in the precedence table?
Well, obviously above times. Trying to remember.
Well, I can see why it might be above times, because if you imagine, dx something or other times dy something or other, you don't want it to be. You know what? This is annoying, but I don't think it's wrong.
Well,
I agree with that. I mean, we would tell students that they really need to put parentheses there to avoid the ambiguity.
Yeah, I mean, because otherwise, this. Look, this.
Well, I don't think that's true. If it were f of x, g of x, then we might. But I don't think if for 2f of x that we would tell students they have to include parentheses. Everybody would just understand.
Look at this case here. This case here is very nice that it works without any weird parentheses. And if you had D being lower precedence than times, it wouldn't work. So I don't think we got this wrong. I don't think we've got it wrong. But now, okay, these other things. Oh, I was going to show you one that I don't like very much. No, I'm sorry. I want to do it the other way around. V of wedge. Yeah, like this is a good example of where I would like some kind of auto parenthesization or some ability to tell it to put parens in there, because I haven't a clue which way around that parses.
Well, that's what multi-click is for.
Psst. Hiss.
Yeah.
I know I use
it.
it for that. Yes, I understand that. But if you write it in a document, people don't get to multi-click your piece of paper.
Okay.
I mean, I'd
Right.
like something like this where there's a way of putting parenthesization in here. And this is in the general bucket of finer control of a traditional form, which I'd like us to discuss at some point. But okay, for right now, precedence tables for all these things. Oh boy, what a mess. Dan on a live stream is suggesting why not have a function that creates formal operators. The problem with that is that it's so hard for a person to get that right and to get something that's consistent. I mean, we do have a precedence form function, which people almost never use, which hooks into the internal precedence system.
And has issues that, I in my copious free time, I have attempted to fix, and, the pull request, I think, has been stalled for like 2.5 years. So
why?
Because it's hard.
Oh, I see. Okay.
and it requires it requires me to working uninterrupted without interruption for some period of time. So
right.
Sorry, do we really need to choose different precedences, not having them all equal so that there
I think they
are
should all be
parentheses?
equal. Yeah, I think they should all be equal. Of these buckets, they should all be equal, and possibly they should be equal to plus and times.
Should it be plus and times, or circle plus and circle times?
Maybe better circle plus and circle times. What's the relative precedence of circle plus and circle and plus?
I have to look that up.
Huh. Well, whatever it is, we can't tell. Notice, by the way, that the typesetting has less space around the circle plus than does around the main plus.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, right. Well, and then the other thing we would need to decide are, which of these are flat, which of these are left associative, and which are right associative.
So circle times is tighter than times. Circle plus is tighter than plus.
Yeah, I think that's okay. Is it one step up from those, or is it
no? There's it's times, then center dot, then circle times.
Yeah, center dot is another one we got wrong, but that's a slightly different story.
And then between plus, there's sum and limit and integrates, and then circle plus and minus.
Yeah. But I'm still exercised by the associativity question. I mean, okay, question. Is there a way to make it always parenthesize? Even if we, you understand what I'm saying? That, in other words, if we say something like, if we have
short answer is no.
Not when you're typing. I don't know about
no. I don't care about
typesetting code. But
I'm saying in this case. Oops.
Oh, missed a comma.
Okay, so now why did that parenthesize?
Because you're going against the natural. Because you've explicitly nested something that's flat, right? So that's distinguishing it from the
I see, but it didn't
circle plus of ABC.
Okay, it didn't auto flatten.
Correct.
So it's parsing flat, but it's not evaluation flat.
Correct.
That's
Yes.
fine. Then these operators should be parsing flat, just not evaluation flat.
Okay.
Because that way, when groupings generates them and so on, it'll just if it's binary, if you want it in binary form, it'll do it in binary form. If you don't want it, if you make a thing that isn't binary, it'll make it not not
right.
binary.
So I think there are obviously a couple of exceptions to this, right? Like circle divide. Divide doesn't parse flat.
Yeah.
So it should and like the left semi-direct and right semi-direct times.
What should they do?
Well,
that just requires a moment of thought about how that works. Okay, we should probably wrap up for today, but I think that seems like a good conclusion. So flat for parsing, not flat for evaluation, except in special cases. They would have a times block and a plus block.
Yep, which would just join circle times and plus times. And then I don't know about the semi-direct product, guys.
You have to look it up. I don't know. I'm sure from what I did in the 90s, I'm certain that they have a well-defined precedence.
Okay.
All right. Anything else? Then we've got more things for next time. So, by the way, in a previous meeting, we encountered the difficulty of timing not properly going to parallel threads. But that's another thing that should be on an LCC agenda at some point.
Well, I mean, I don't think it was doing anything wrong there, right? It was doing exactly what you told it to do.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, okay. Anything else? All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks to folks on the live stream. See you another time.
Okay.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.